Hey, good morning. Good morning. We have folks filtering in, but greetings on this last day of March. This is a session we're organizing on solar options for affordable housing developers. As people continue to filter in, just want to say welcome. We're going to be recording this session, so this will be available for posterity. Also want to point out a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. In the handout section, there is a PDF of the presentation that we'll be doing, as well as a little details on other housekeeping items. As we're going to try to march through all of the content on the front end, it's robust, but we hope tailored to your interests. So please add questions as we move through the presentation using the question module in your dashboard. Yeah, and we're going to get started. As I mentioned, welcome. Most of you work in or around the affordable housing sector. We've had the pleasure of working with you through the ComEd Affordable Housing New Construction Program or similar. I've gotten a lot of interest over the last couple months about the potential role of solar energy in affordable housing development. So we've curated a panel of folks today to talk about how to integrate clean energy into your projects. We have me, Dan Mooring, from the ComEd Affordable Housing New Construction offering. We'll talk a little bit about how to start with efficiency first, then I'll hand it off to Paul Miller with ComEd's Green Power Connection team. And then finally, bringing us home with a lot of scintillating details about the finer points and the conventions that you guys work with is Vito Greco, Director of Solar Programs at Elevate. So without further ado, I'm going to get started and just lay out the agenda for us here. So I'll be talking first, just briefly giving everyone a little refresher on program incentives for energy efficient design through our utility offerings. Paul's going to talk about how to kind of start wrapping your head around the opportunity for solar using some of the online tools that ComEd has. And then Vito will be really providing a lot of valuable insight and different considerations for assessing your solar opportunity and integrating it into your next development project. We want to have a robust discussion. This is a relatively small group of folks who work deeply in the industry, so I really hope we want to save as much time for answering questions and really having a discussion. And get your feedback. This is our first foray, but we'd love to do more. So without further ado, I'm going to turn off my shining face and we will move into the presentation. So as they say, energy efficiency first is always the best way to start. So we are delighted to offer and continue to support affordable housing projects throughout ComEd's service area through the Affordable Housing New Construction offering. We offer financial and technical assistance for affordable projects to achieve beyond code energy performance. We also help to monitor market trends and things and try to provide education and training such as this today. So the central document for the Affordable Housing New Construction Program is our technical standard, the ComEd Multifamily Standard. We do want to look at addressing energy efficiency and health and comfort of the residents holistically. So we kind of break it out by different systems. Starting from the outside in, there's certain requirements for envelope measures. So we look for high performance windows and reduced infiltration in your building. So kind of Energy Star labeled windows, and whether it's a new construction or major renovation, we want to make sure that the building is airtight, and that's validated by third-party testing. Next slide, please. Once we keep the outside, we want to make sure the inside is comfortable and efficient. And so we look at high performance HVAC measures, which really starts with the HVAC equipment, really corresponding to the top tier of energy efficiency. We're agnostic on fuel source. You can use electric, you can use gas, use a variety of different systems, but we want to make sure that that's being produced efficiently. We also want to make sure that the air is being moved efficiently. So we look at the fan component of not just the HVAC systems, but additional ventilation equipment like bathroom fans and kitchen hoods. We want to make sure that your ventilation is not just efficient, but also healthy. So providing a constant supply of fresh air in compliance with ASHRAE 62.2 is also important. Always happy to discuss projects and details with you. Let's move on to the next component of the standard, which is illuminating efficiently. This is becoming more and more standard practice, but we want to make sure that we're being diligent on the way we illuminate our buildings. So looking at high performance interior lighting, primarily LED and Energy Star rated fixtures. We set a certain lighting power density for common areas that we're looking for. On the exterior, we're also looking for LEDs with high efficacy rating. Just a couple more elements on our base standard here. Next slide, please. We also want to look at the hot water production as well as the distribution. So we look again for Energy Star labeled water heating equipment, as well as certain measures in the recirculating pump if it's a central system. At the end of the line, we want to make sure that we're using water efficiently. So looking for low flow fixtures in the kitchens and bathrooms that generally correspond with the WaterSense rating criteria. Finally, our minimum standard requires you to use Energy Star rated appliances and other equipment for which the Energy Star label is applicable. This year, we broke out the standard a little bit and also provided some additional bonus measures for you to incorporate exciting and energy efficient technology. Next slide, please. So that includes advanced controls for HVAC, both at the for the units primarily, as well as interior lighting controls that allow for bi-level switching and occupancy and vacancy controls so that we're not unnecessarily illuminating empty spaces. We've also provided an additional bonus incentive for people to include energy recovery ventilation in their packages, and in keeping with other advanced and exciting technologies, we are trying to provide additional incentives for projects that use heat pump technology, both for space conditioning and for hot water heating. Next slide, please. And so we always want to support as many affordable projects as we can, and we would love to talk to you further about how you can start your path to net zero and clean energy with a solid foundation of energy efficiency. So if you're in ComEd's service area, if you're working on a new construction or major renovation project that includes an income eligible component, we are agnostic on multifamily, single family, townhomes, low-rise, mid-rise, garden apartments. If you're building a housing for income eligible people, we want to be supporting the energy efficiency components of that. So we always want to engage early in the planning process and start talking through really the details and considerations of how to design around the ComEd multifamily standard, and even how we can design around the ComEd multifamily standard, and as we'll touch on later, make that building ready to integrate solar energy. So just one last element, next slide please, is a breakdown of how the money actually gets tabulated up. And this is all on the application, and I'd be happy to talk with any of you at greater length. But as you can see, we have 325 per gross square foot of income eligible area as our base. As you add more of the advanced measures, you get a greater incentive. So adding advanced controls, energy recovery, heat pump HVAC, and heat pump water heating can get you up to $4.40 per income eligible gross square foot. So that's a quick overview of the Affordable Housing New Construction Program. Again, it is the most important building block for solar. Your solar will go further if it's in an energy efficient building. And to help us think through a little bit more about how to understand your solar opportunity and some of the steps to start assessing and some of the tools and resources available, we have my associate Paul Miller from the Green Power Connection, and we'll move to the next slide, and I will hand it off to Paul. So thanks everyone, and please, as we go through, remember any questions, please put those in the question box. So thanks, and take it away, Paul.
Great, thanks so much, Dan. Dan, really quick, can you confirm that you can hear me okay?
I hear you great.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming out today. I really like presenting on solar, especially in tandem with the energy efficiency programs available as well. They really work well hand in hand in lowering your energy bills and really, getting a bigger benefit from your facility and less of an impact, on the environment and your community. So today, my segment is going to be very high level. I'm really going to focus on the role that ComEd plays in the solar process, really focusing on ComEd solar programs and also available resources that we have that we offer online. So for the most part, my segment will include some common myths about solar, and then we're going to get into some interconnection considerations, getting your system connected to our grid. And then we're going to discuss net metering, some of the eligibility requirements for net metering that you may want to keep in mind and consider when deciding whether or not you do want to go solar. And then I'm going to finish it off with a high-level overview of some of our online resources that we offer on our ComEd website. Next slide, please. So when some people hear that ComEd has a solar team, they're kind of surprised. As some of you may know, ComEd does not sell or install solar ourselves. So that prompts the question, why does ComEd have a solar team then? And really, it's to help our customers navigate through their solar journey. It is a very long journey going from choosing a developer to getting the system installed. So we want to be there for our customers to ensure that all questions they have are answered. And that we have reliable information on our website that they can always double check when they hear offers and things of that nature. So really what spurred the solar team at ComEd, that is the My Green Power Connection team, really was when FEJA was passed. So that was the Future Energy Jobs Act, as you all may know, and that's really what spurred the growth of solar in our area and made it a lot more financially appealing. So when that legislation was passed, we knew we were going to see a large influx of customers come our way. So to better prepare for that, we created the Green Power Connection team. That is the team I am on at ComEd to help our customers answer any questions and guide them through that solar process. And like I discussed briefly before, we also created a robust line of resources available on our website. So I also want to briefly go over some of those resources at the end of my segment as well. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to go over some common myths and the facts related to them of going solar in our state and in our region. So for the top left box, that fact there, a common myth is that we do not get enough sunlight in the Midwest for solar to be beneficial. So that is just a myth. The fact is that we get plenty of sunlight to take advantage of solar. Solar is the most abundantly available renewable energy resource in the world. And there is plenty of it even in our region to take advantage of it. So even though we have winters where we may not see the sun for a month or two, you still can get a benefit of solar. You can see that return on investment if you are a good candidate. Another common myth is that, okay, I chose to go solar, now I don't need to be connected to the grid, right? I can depend on my solar system to get all the electricity needs. So this relates to the fact boxes in the top right and the bottom left. So the fact is that even if you have solar, you will need to be connected to the grid still so that you still can reliably receive energy from us. So there may be times where even if you have solar, it may not be enough for you to utilize it throughout the day and year. So one great example is nighttime. A lot of solar customers do not have an energy storage system, so they of course still need to use the grid's energy during those times when they need to use that energy. And then the final myth is that if I want to go solar in Illinois right now, it's going to be a big investment. I would have to get solar on my roof or somewhere on my property. And this relates to the fact box in the bottom right on this slide, that actually you do have options. If you want to go solar, you don't have to install solar on your roof. There's fantastic community solar programs now available in our state. So whether your home is just not a good candidate, your building or facility, or for whatever reason you just don't want to make that large investment, you can choose an alternate option of community solar where you still get benefits of solar even without having solar on your property. So great options there in our state as well. These are fairly new, so we just want to make sure everyone is familiar with the myths and facts in our area. Next slide, please. So regardless of if you choose to install a private solar energy system, so that is typically what you would see on a roof of a home or a building, versus community solar where you don't actually have that solar on your property, either way, those projects do need to get interconnected to the grid. So what the interconnection is that I'm referring to here is a physical connection of the solar system tying into the grid. So the reason why an interconnection of the solar system to the grid is necessary is that, just like when I discussed, there may be times where you may need to use energy from the grid when your solar is not producing enough. The inverse is that there may be times when your solar is producing more energy than what your home or facility needs at the time. So if being interconnected to the grid allows you to send that energy back to the grid, which allows you to receive potential credits on your bills for what that energy is worth. So you may receive a benefit for energy that you're not even using directly, which really is great and helps justify why an interconnection to our grid is necessary for solar. Next slide, please. And on this next slide, I just wanted to give a breakdown of different application types that come our way. So again, if you need to install solar in our territory, there is applications required to be submitted by ComEd. Mainly it's the interconnection application, along with there are other applications for some programs and incentives as well that I will get into. But the interconnection application is when we will study your proposed connection of your solar facility to our grid, and we are just making sure that it is being done safely and that no upgrades are required to our infrastructure to accommodate this additional production that it potentially will come onto our grid. So that is one reason why an interconnection application is very helpful. You will know before even installing your system whether or not an upgrade is required on our end, so you can factor that into whether or not you still want to proceed with the project. So again, here's a breakdown of the different levels of interconnection applications. Right now it's showing level 1 through 3 in that first column. The description in the following column is the system size that fits into that level of the application, followed by the application fee and the estimated timeline. So I do want to point out that that is an estimated timeline. Sometimes the reviews are completed well before that, but again, there are complicated interconnections as well, so sometimes it could take longer. So that's why we have that estimate there. And then when you look at the bottom of this section as well, there are a few additional application types. So that is the pre-application and the net metering application. So the pre-application is a really good idea when you're really early on in a project. I do recommend for fairly large solar projects at least, to submit a pre-application, because again, in terms of determining feasibility of the project, whether it's either financially feasible or other characteristics, the pre-application will let you know as early as possible about those details. So before even submitting your actual application to us, the official application, we can let you know about that. Again, that's mainly for larger projects where the financials may have a big impact with an upgrade, but pre-applications are accepted for any system between 2 megawatts and 20. And then the following application, the final one we have on this page, is the net metering application, which we're going to go into detail on the following slide. But an application to review is also required because there are some eligibility requirements we have to ensure that the customer meets to be signed up for the net metering program. Next slide, please. So that net metering program I talked about briefly. So this really is a great program we offer at ComEd. I did touch on the fact earlier that the grid connection is necessary because there may be times where you're sending excess energy to the grid. So this middle graphic here really, I think, does a great job of displaying that. So going 1 through 4, you can see where the energy is traveling. Typically, if you're producing solar energy, your facility will use that energy first before any energy goes out to the grid. So if your facility needs to use energy, it would always use solar energy first if it's available. But if there are times when your facility does not need to use all of that energy, you're going to send it out to the grid. Most of our customers already have our smart AMI meters, and those meters can read when you're sending energy out to us, and we're able to record how much energy you send to us. And on the net metering program, you get credits on your bill for what that energy is worth. So again, even if you're not using the energy directly, you still are getting benefits from that solar production. So really great program. There are a few eligibility requirements to be on this program. There are a few system size caps. The main one is a hard cap of a 2 megawatt AC. That is the largest system you can have to be eligible for the net metering program. But additionally, there is another sizing restraint, which is that the net metering program is set up for a system that is sized for your facility, meaning that it is not a program for a facility meant to produce much more than what your home or business needs. So what we do when people apply for net metering is we look at the size of the system they're proposing to install. We look at how much energy that system is estimated to produce in a year, and we compare that to the customer's past 12 months of usage, and the estimated production cannot be greater than 110% of the customer's past 12 months of usage. So one thing I wanted to discuss with this audience today, knowing that a lot of your work being done is new construction, one question may be posed with this is that, what if my building doesn't have 12 months of usage? So if that happens, what we would do is we would use the class average for whatever rate type you are on with your ComEd account, and use that class average to compare the estimated production to the class average usage. So again, even without having 12 months of usage, we can give customers eligibility to net metering. So if you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, it does give a breakdown of what those class averages are. So these are commercial sizes. There also is a breakdown on our FAQ section of our solar slides of residential class averages as well. So this gives you a sense of what you can size a system to if you're new construction and you do want to immediately be on net metering. So one other thing I would add to that is that, say you are new construction and the system size you want to install produces more than what these class averages are. So that's okay. You can install a system that produces more than your 12 months usage or more than the class average if you believe that the system is going to, or if your facility will use more energy and basically meet the production of that system in the future. You can choose to install that system now. It may not be eligible for net metering right away, but you can always apply for net metering down the line. And there are different programs that you can be on in the meantime where you still get compensation for your excess generation. It's just at a lower rate. Next slide, please. All right, so we are on to the resources section of my segment. So I just really want to highlight some of the great resources that are available to our customers. So whether it's yourself looking into it more, or you have some either tenants or customers yourself that want to learn more about solar, I highly recommend directing them to ComEd.com/solar, where we have a lot of really great resources to really better set the expectation for customers on whether or not going solar is right for them. So among these, which we'll get into detail on the next slides, is a solar checklist, a solar calculator, and then the online portal as well. Next slide, please. So this is the solar checklist. This is mainly our recommended steps for customers who are interested in going solar, but they don't know a place to start or a path to follow. So this is really just recommended A to B, how to get started with solar. So the research, generally when you find a developer you are happy to work with that is happy to install the solar for you, they often will apply on your behalf for the interconnections we went into detail on previous slides. So the interconnection application, net metering application, things like that really very often are handled by your solar developer. So in this checklist, once you find that developer on step 1, most commonly, they will take the reins from there on step 2 on applying to connect. That is where we will review the interconnection application, net metering application, things of that nature. And then after that, all of the applications were approved. That's when the system will be installed, operate. And then forward is just enjoy the benefits of your system, see the reduction in your bill prices, see the credits on your bills, things of that nature. Next slide, please. So the solar calculator, this is one of my favorite tools on our websites. It's a great resource for customers very early on in the process of going solar. And what this does is it really sets the expectation of a customer of what solar could mean for them if they're planning on installing private rooftop solar on their property. Because it gives them a breakdown of what that could look like for them before even talking to a solar developer. So again, once you do find a developer and meet with them, you already have an idea in your head of how much solar could fit on your roof, roughly how much energy that system is estimated to produce, and also how much of that energy will really reduce on your bills. So really what you would do when you go into this tool is you type in your address. From there, it'll pull up a satellite image of your home or facility and let you know right off the bat, does your rooftop have good solar access? So like in the image on this screen, you see that all the yellow dots there, those bright yellow dots are great solar access, whereas the darker orange, brown dots are not as great, not recommended to put solar in there. So again, before even meeting with a developer, you could know whether or not your roof is a good candidate for solar. So when I put my address into this tool, my home is surrounded by trees, and it says I have very limited solar exposure, and it asks maybe I should consider community solar instead, or if I want to proceed with the report. So right off the bat, it lets you know whether or not your roof is a good candidate. And then from there, as you can see on the left, it gives you a breakdown. If you log into your ComEd My account, or just enter an estimated monthly bill that you pay on an annual basis, it'll compare how much solar can fit onto your roof to how much you pay in bills to see what type of price reduction on your bill you can get and how much of that bill you can offset with solar. So again, really great resource here with the solar calculator on ComEd's website to just get that idea of, is solar good for my roof, my property, things of that nature. Next slide. So once you have gone through the solar calculator tool, maybe your home or facility is a great candidate for solar, you're still interested, you say great. In that report we were looking on the previous slide, once you scroll down, it'll say, like what you see, do you want to find a contractor? It'll bring you to this find a contractor page. So like I mentioned before, ComEd does not sell or install solar. We also do not partner with any solar developers who install solar. So instead, what we do is that we provide recommendations on how to find a qualified contractor to work with. So we include these steps here. We also include a link on this page to the Illinois Commerce Commission's website, where you can find all of the certified installers in our state. So that's one thing to consider when you're deciding to go solar is that the solar installer you work with does need to be certified by the ICC to install solar in our state. And that is another eligibility requirement for net metering that we check for at that time, whether or not your installer was certified. So that is definitely something you want to verify as well on your end while you are seeking a qualified contractor. Next slide, please. So once you find that qualified contractor, like I mentioned before, generally it is that contractor who will do the application work on the customer's behalf, applying for interconnection and net metering. But of course, the customer themselves can apply for it as well if they would like to, or if their contractor just doesn't offer this type of work. And to make it really streamlined, we created an online application portal that makes it very easy to go through each section, fill out all the information that we need to know with descriptions on that information, so that you can fill out the application very quickly and easily online. And we will also be sure to send notifications to the applicant on what stage the applications are at, just so we are keeping everyone in the loop on the process. Because as you saw with the application types, the timelines can be, go into a month or so. So we definitely want to make sure that everyone is kept in the loop on where we are at with the application process. Next slide, please. So finally, we have the customer portal. So again, say the developer is applying on your behalf. The customer, if your email, which is associated to your ComEd account, is on the application, you still will see where your applications are at, even if you're not applying on your own behalf for the projects and the applications. So we keep the customer in the loop, even if the developer is the one doing the work with the application. So the customers can still track that online through their ComEd My account. So I believe that was all of the resources I wanted to highlight today, along with the programs that we discussed earlier in my segment. So I believe Vito is going to get into more details on considerations and programs on when deciding if going solar is still right for you. So with that, I will pass it off to you, Vito. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you, Paul, and thanks, Dan, for putting this together. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to folks about this. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into site suitability for solar, what the financials look like, and very specifically, what considerations you need to take to integrate solar into LIHTC financed projects. There's a number of different considerations. At a high level, it's all the same considerations for installing solar, but the process and the financials look a little bit different, and it'll be helpful for you all to understand a little bit about that. So digging in, I wanted to give you a brief overview of what I'll cover. So if you go to the next slide. So I wanted to look at solar for new construction and retrofitting existing properties with solar a little bit differently, and put both of those into the context of LIHTC projects, and then get into technical considerations, incentives and tax treatments, and then look at the financials overall to see how these pencil out and how that might affect some of your considerations. And then the last few things are to really talk about tenant benefits, how some of the different programs available in Illinois impact tenant benefits, and then again, just wrapping up LIHTC and solar. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about Elevate Energy, who I work for. We are a nonprofit of about 150 people, and we're a mission-driven organization that focuses on getting energy solutions to those who need it most. And you can move to the next slide. Our focus is really on working with affordable housing owners and developers, nonprofits, critical service providers, and low-income communities broadly. We also work with governments and public agencies, utilities, financial institutions, around energy and water efficiency and optimization. Next slide. Some of the things that we do are work with you for portfolio planning, look across your portfolio to find the opportunities for energy efficiency, water efficiency, solar energy, energy storage, remote monitoring. We do energy, water, and solar assessments, ASHRAE level 1, 2, and 3 assessments. And we have a big focus on integrated design. So putting all of those components into your project, helping you understand where the opportunities are, how to maximize local, state, and federal incentives to help pay for these upgrades or projects. And then more advanced energy modeling, again, solar storage, and really net zero energy feasibility. You can go on to the next slide. We work in 8 states, and then we work nationally with Department of Energy and the Energy Labs and other national organizations to advance our mission. All right, next, I wanted to get into siting, so you can think about either your property or your planned development to think about what how solar fits in. Is it feasible? What does the opportunity look like? So in the next slide, I want to talk about a couple of high-level things to be thinking about for your site in the context of new construction. These are the components to think about. Shading is the first and obvious thing to think about. You want, most people are considering rooftop installations for affordable housing. Although we've done a number of ground mount, which tends to be suburban and maybe more exurban or rural places where you have perhaps a campus, a building, and a fair amount of land. We've done projects like that work perfectly well, and in many cases have a lot of efficiencies that rooftop solar doesn't have. But let's focus on rooftop solar and think about some of these things. For shading, you want that location on the roof where you have a lot of room to install solar panels to be as close to south facing as possible, where there isn't a lot of obstructions between that roof space and the southern sky. And that includes not just other buildings or trees, but also, if you have a multi-level roof, you want to make sure that ideally that the place where you put your solar panels are not obstructed by other higher levels of roof, your chimneys, your vents, your equipment. We can typically work around that, but the biggest contiguous space, non-obstructed is ideal. And then structural issues, I think, when you're dealing with new construction, tend to be less of an issue. In Illinois, particularly, I mean, all of these are local ordinances, local jurisdictions, and but across Illinois, there's a lot of commonalities. I also thought I'd caveat by saying I'm not a structural engineer, not an electrician. My background is in electrical engineering. But ultimately, most of these steps, like your structural assessment and your electrical assessment, at some point in the solar development process are signed off by an engineer before they can proceed according to these local jurisdictions. But up front, it's good to know a couple of things. So structurally, for instance, you need to accommodate an additional 3 to 6 pounds depending on your jurisdiction. But in Illinois, because of the snow weight requirements, those are almost always accounted for. We very rarely had to do anything structurally to accommodate the additional weight. Typically, the structural issues come in on existing properties where there might be issues with water damage or termites or things like that. So for new construction, it's typically less of an issue. for roofing, again, large flat roofs are ideal. South facing are ideal. Standing seam roofs are ideal, but many other roof types will accommodate that. You can put solar on a pitched roof or a flat roof. With a pitched roof, you are penetrating the roof membrane to install your racking and support the panels, which is again very common. And those are then, you know, the flashing is updated to accommodate those penetrations. And it's pretty much routine in the industry. A flat roof, you don't need to penetrate. You can use a ballast system where they just sit on top of that structure. They are angled to the appropriate azimuth for wherever that roof is sitting and where the southern sky is. So you can pretty much accommodate anything, not anything. I mean, you can have really complex gabled structures and multi-level roofs that are just really not conducive to solar. But again, large flat roofs are ideal. There's a little note I put in here, and I'll make these available, these slides available, I think, to everyone. So if I gloss over something a little bit quickly, you'll have some notes. But it is a good idea to include a no objection commitment in your roof warranty, particularly if you are penetrating that roof. Those are, again, much more common today than they were even 5 years ago in terms of your roof warranties. So they shouldn't be a deal breaker in any context, but there are a few steps you can take to make sure that they don't affect your long-term warranty. The other consideration is wiring. Generally speaking, wiring is pretty forgiving. You know, you want to make sure that you have space in your low voltage switch for distribution. In your breaker panel, you need space. And the good rule of thumb is 160 amps for 100 kilowatts of solar. You want to make sure you plan for additional space in your risers or cable runs. So, you know, if you're not going to build solar, for instance, on day one for a new construction, you can leave additional room to make it solar ready. But generally, this is probably more of an issue for existing construction. Making those upgrades are generally not too costly and can be rolled into the install costs of solar. For interconnection, a few simple things to think about is that you want to be able to make sure that in some capacity or another, the solar array that you're designing has easy access and is fairly close to where your panel is. The fewer runs that you have to make, the better. But for rooftop solar, generally speaking, you can accommodate any roof design to make for an easy interconnection, to get to your meter, to get to your panel. You do want to plan for internet connection to your inverters. There's a few different kinds of inverters. There's either a microinverter, which is a part of every solar panel, and it converts the DC electricity that solar panels produce to AC electricity that you can use in your building. Otherwise, you can use inverters where there's typically one inverter for every dozen or so panels. Those can be on the roof or in your electrical room. You just want to be able to know that you need space in your electrical room if that's the route you're going to take. So if you're not sure, leaving some extra room in new construction isn't a bad idea if you want to be solar ready. And landscaping, not too much to consider, but you know, trees are a big deal, and we talked about that in shading. But you do want to think about the long-term tree growth, you know, so you don't want to, if you have the option of planting trees, don't plant that on the south side if they're big growth trees and you want to install solar, you know, plant them on the north side or on the other areas. Otherwise, if you're doing ground mount, there's a few other things to consider, but these days you can do a lot to integrate native plants and such into ground mounts without impacting the the feasibility of solar. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. I want to talk for a little bit about existing buildings. So the things to think about in terms of roofing for existing buildings is a new roof is ideal. You want to, a solar array will live for 25 to 30 years and sometimes even more. You do need to do upgrades. Inverters don't last quite as long as the panels do, but the racking and the panels will last a long time. To remove those, to do roof repairs or replacements and put them back is costly. So you want to avoid it if you can. For those flat roofs where you can do ballasts that don't penetrate the actual roof, it's a little easier and less costly to do that. But a good rule of thumb is at least 15 years or a new roof is ideal. You want to have a lot of good roof space, south facing and obstruction free. Certain types of roofing are not recommended. The standing seam roofs are ideal. Shake metal or metal shingle or slate roofs are not great for solar. So consider that. I think those tend to be older construction anyway. I won't go through all the cautions, but if you have an existing building, those of you who are doing these projects and retrofitting are probably familiar with this stuff anyway. But there are things you can look at to get a sense of what condition your roof is in. But can't stress enough that you do want to have a roof in good condition. If you're doing a full LIHTC retrofit on a property, chances are roofing, if it needs it, is going to get done. So it's a really optimal time to be considering integrating solar into that. Next slide, please. Electrical, again, much more forgiving. You want to have newer panels. You certainly don't want to have fuses, but I think you would be upgrading that anyway if you are doing a retrofit. You want to have space for the additional breakers. We talked about that 160 amp for 100 kilowatt. If there are issues as indicated in this cautions column, like uncovered boxes or exposed wiring, you're going to have to probably fix that anyway. If you need to upgrade your panel, add service or space, generally speaking, they're not tremendously cost prohibitive and can typically be rolled into a solar installation, but it's something to consider if you are doing a retrofit. All right, next slide, please. So structural, again, I think if most properties, even older ones, accommodate the weight issues, typically in Illinois because of the snow requirements. Not true of all properties, and there are different types, but if we're talking about affordable housing or multifamily housing in general, typically we have not seen a lot of problems with the weight issues. We see more problems with decay and issues like that, like dry rot or insects, previous water or fire damage. There are ways to look in some of these comment notes here that can give you some ideas of what to look for in your joists and in some of your structural issues, even where you have roof cavities and some of it's not obvious. There's ways of getting in there and looking at this, and that's part of what assessments that Elevate will do when we come out. I think Dan talked briefly about the new construction program. For the existing construction programs, Elevate administers the income eligible multifamily program for ComEd, public housing programs. We administer nonprofit programs as well as the Illinois Solar for All programs. So we're doing these assessments all the time. It is frankly an anomaly so far in what we've seen to see some of these issues. And when we have seen some issues with joists, reinforcing those joists hasn't been a tremendous adder to the costs. But they are something to keep in mind if you're considering solar on an existing structure. All right, with that, I wanted to move on a little bit to the feasibility of solar and a little bit about value. So as we get into the solar feasibility, there's a couple things that go into understanding the solar opportunity for your property. A shading analysis is pretty important, particularly in more urban or dense areas. You want to be able to understand, are the buildings around you or trees or even the way the roof structure has been designed, do those present enough of a shading barrier to make solar not feasible? More often than not, what we see is that there are optimal places on the roof for solar because of shade, and the system might need to be downsized a bit because you don't want to put panels that are only marginally effective at collecting sunlight. So that shading analysis is pretty important. The system design is very often working around those sort of roofing obstructions, your venting, your chimneys, and that shading analysis to place those panels optimally to make sure that you can get your runs, your cable runs and such to your panel efficiently, or to your inverters efficiently. So we take all that into consideration, or any solar developer will take that into consideration. Load modeling is important. You want to be able to look at the loads and make sure you're designing a system, to Paul's earlier point about, to really what you're going to use. And you don't want a system too large where it might impact your eligibility for net metering, or just generally send too much back to the grid. For new construction, you can still do load modeling. And in fact, it is probably important. You can look at those classes that Paul talked about, or we can get a little bit more specific by looking at the number of units, how big each unit is, what kind of energy efficiency or appliances, and really get pretty exact at what those loads are, and put a system together that really accommodates your design. Better to do that with new construction. But very often, depending on the roof and how big the building is, you don't typically have enough space to accommodate the full load anyway, so it's less of an issue. But load modeling, I think, is important either way. Metering is the other thing to consider, whether you're master metered or multi-metered. Typically, if it's new construction, it's going to be multi-metered. The existing structures that are grandfathered in, that multi-meter versus master meter really makes a big difference in terms of how much solar you can get on. If you have 1 meter, of course, then all of that solar feeds the 1 meter and offsets that more easily. If you are multi-metered, then really you're probably looking at your common loads, and depending on the design, that may not be that big. If you're in a more suburban or rural area, then you may have a lot of exterior lighting. You may have common areas in buildings, including laundry facilities and things like that, that do eat up a lot of energy. So we'll want to design that system based on that metering as well. And then net metering, of course, you want to be able to look at net metering and make sure that typically you're not exporting too much. But in Illinois, net metering is on your side. It works well. You get effectively the full supply and capacity. You're getting close to the full retail rate for those bill credits when you send that solar energy, excess solar energy, to the grid. So the net metering is really favorable for you in that context. In other areas outside of Illinois, you may only have supply only net metering, which is the case with community solar, or avoiding costs or any other things, or some states don't have net metering at all, in which case you need to optimize how much energy you use from your solar system in real time and export little or none if you can. So those are the things to consider in terms of how a system is designed and optimized for your site. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about incentives and the tax considerations specific to Illinois. So these are really where you get the value of solar besides just the energy that it's created. The first is renewable energy certificates or renewable energy credits. Two programs in Illinois are the Adjustable Block Program, which is also known as Illinois Shines, or the Illinois Solar for All program. Both of those allow you to sell the renewable energy certificates. So whenever you have solar, a qualified solar project, you produce energy, and for every megawatt hour of energy you produce, you sell a REC. And that REC you sell typically to the utilities or the state of Illinois, and you get a value for each of those RECs. For example, depending on the size, you might see $30 or $40 per REC value for adjustable block. For solar for all, that same system, if it qualifies, might be more like $50 or $60 or sometimes higher. And that really goes a long way to help you pay for the solar installation. What that REC is, without going into too much detail about that here, is essentially the environmental benefits separate from the energy. And states that have programs like this allow you to separate the two so that you can help pay for the installation. You have to be careful that technically when you sell the environmental benefits, how you talk about the clean energy on your roof has to change, because you're essentially selling the rights to talk about the clean energy. A little complicated, but we don't need to get into too much detail here. Other incentives, there is the capacity or smart inverter rebate that ComEd has for eligible projects. The investment tax credit, and you can use the investment tax credit with LIHTC. It is reduced, but it still adds value. Also, you can depreciate the full value of solar and even energy storage, either with the traditional MACRs or with the bonus depreciation. So those tax benefits can be layered on top of LIHTC and really increase the value of those incentives. And there, of course, there are other tax credits like new markets tax credits or opportunity zones. And all of those can be layered. They all just have different implications. We'll talk a little bit about some of those implications specific to LIHTC. So if we move on to the next slides, we'll start getting more into the financial analysis and making it pencil out. The first thing to consider is LIHTC specifically. So 100% of the solar installation costs can be applied to your LIHTC basis. There are issues with bond finance housing that can lower that, but that is true for any LIHTC development. When you layer LIHTC and ITC and the depreciation, you could layer them all together. You lower the ITC amount, but the depreciation is not affected, whether you take MACRs or you take the full bonus depreciation for solar. Generally speaking, that is adding, at least 15% of the cost of installation in a tax credit, and 30 to 50% or even more can be depreciated over 6 years, or with a big chunk up front with that bonus depreciation. So you're getting a lot of tax benefits with solar, and doing a LIHTC deal doesn't affect that. You can add a lot of value. Couple of things to consider is that you need to calculate that LIHTC basis up front. If you incorporate solar, you want to do it from the beginning. You can recalculate your basis, but for those of you who have done that, it's a pain, and you don't want to go through that process. So the point there is that if you're planning a LIHTC development and you're thinking about solar, do it up front. Make it a part of your project plan. Don't be scared to do it, because it's being done all the time, and you are really adding a lot of additional value to help you pay for that solar. And LIHTC is just another source to help you pay for that. We'll talk a little bit about how much that is in the next couple slides. Be aware that and I'm sure you are, LIHTC is available, is allocated according with your expenses, right? Whereas ITC is based on a credit, so it's a tax credit that is considered income. As such, your management fees have to be typically like to be considered as a fixed amount up front. That's typically not too big of a deal. That the solar development costs and those admin fees when you're working with a developer are typically included in your all-in installation costs. And these days for rooftop solar, we're seeing them even less than $2 an installed watt. That said, I am not a tax expert. Talk to a tax expert. Your LIHTC folks will understand this stuff. Generally speaking, when you're adding solar, it doesn't change that too much. It changes how you take your ITC, but it won't change your LIHTC. So certainly don't be afraid to add solar, but just try and think of it up front. Okay, moving on. I wanted to talk about a couple of the Illinois specific REC programs. The two, again, we talked about were the Adjustable Block Program and the Illinois Solar for All program, which Elevate administers for the state. Couple things to consider for Adjustable Block Program and for the Solar for All. There are legislative hurdles that we're dealing with right now. For Adjustable Block Program, they went through 4 different blocks. They go through blocks that the value of the RECs decrease as each block is completely filled. And they've gone through 4 different blocks, and there need to be essentially some legislative fixes that allow us to roll over money and get to new funding moving forward. But we're in a great place in Illinois in terms of the visibility of this stuff. So I feel in the next few weeks we'll overcome the legislative hurdles about keeping the money flowing that we have currently, and that new legislation is already in committee for funding this well into the future. So I'm very optimistic. We're at an unusual spot, but I think that won't be a problem. The Adjustable Block Program in general will fund just about any solar installation in the state, whether it's rooftop or ground mount, anything that is below 2 megawatts and serves an existing load. For Solar for All, that is specifically meant to serve low-income and environmental justice communities. So for affordable housing, it aligns very nicely. There are different programs that within Solar for All that will qualify. Distributed generation is behind the meter installation for residential, so for affordable housing, either in environmental justice or serving low-income families. Same qualifications as the energy efficiency program, 80% or less AMI, with significantly higher incentive values than the Adjustable Block Program. But there's also a nonprofit or public facilities subprogram, and some nonprofit affordable housing developers could qualify for those programs, and community solar. So you might qualify as a subscriber or an anchor subscriber to a community solar program and see significantly more savings than the market will bear. What I would note is that typically for behind the meter installations, there are no direct tenant benefits, but with Solar for All, they require direct tenant benefits. So we might talk about that a little bit and in the context of how the value is shared in subsequent slides here. So the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the specific value that you see in solar and across these different programs. So this is quite a busy slide, and it's something you can look at a little bit more subsequently. And we're running out of time, so I don't want to take too much time. But for a typical 100 kilowatt installation on a multifamily property, let's say, you can see what some of the assumptions are here. But generally speaking, what this shows you is the gold line represents the cost of the installation, the all-in cost of installation. And what the 4 different categories show on the first column, if there's no incentive at all, the only incentive is net metering. That is the energy the solar is produced. Solar is cheap enough right now that that energy produced typically is more over the life of the system than the cost to install it. So that's good news for solar. When you add tax benefits, even without other incentives, you can see that that increases the overall value over the life of the system pretty significantly. A couple of key things to look at are the payback periods. So when you add the tax benefits, it brings it down to just over 5 years payback. And for a 100 kilowatt system, you'd see an average of about $13,000 in average annual revenues from that solar over time. So that's pretty significant just with the tax benefit. When you add those REC incentives, I've added those in the third column for adjustable block and the fourth column for solar for all. Then you add value significantly greater, and the payback periods are significantly less. What you'll notice is that with the adjustable block program, there's no requirements to share benefits with your tenants. But with the Illinois Solar for All program, there is. So the REC values are significantly higher, but your net metering is effectively cut in half because Solar for All, while they give you greater REC value, say that you need to share those with your tenants. So there's some unusual things you'll see is that the payback is much faster because you get that REC payment upfront. But overall, the value is a little less because what you're doing is you're sharing it with your tenants. And there's ways to share that with your tenants, even if you have a multi-meter building and they pay their own electricity. So what I would say is that, well, you see greater value to the property owner with adjustable block program. You still are paying for the solar completely, lowering your operating cost with Solar for All and sharing benefits with the income eligible tenants. So it's a win-win, and you get a great payback in terms of getting that in less than 2 years. All right, I know there's lots more we can talk about with that slide and that value, and I'm happy to take some of the in our Q&A. But last slide I wanted to show was just to consider PPA as well. So all of that was layering a typical solar installation into a LIHTC project and showing you the value that you would get. And they look really good in Illinois. Another thing to consider is a PPA, which can be installed on your roof, but it's owned by a third party. In that context, it exists completely outside of your LIHTC project. In the market today, you might see 10 or 20% savings from a solar developer. You can call solar developers and say, hey, I'm interested in a PPA. Here's some examples of what those paybacks look like for a typical PPA based on different savings. What you'll see is for a 10% saving, which is typically the lowest you're going to see in the market, you might save with that same 100 kilowatt installation on a multifamily property about $1,500 a year, $1,600 a year. 20%, you're doubling that. There's nothing to pay up front. So your payback is right away. If you can eke out a 30% savings, again, you're going to see significantly more savings. However, if you qualify for Solar for All, you're required to get 50% savings. And for affordable housing, you would qualify typically for that in Illinois, and you're seeing close to an $8,000 saving. And you might be able to get benefits to your tenants as well. So you can consider a PPA. If you're also paying demand charges, and depending on your rate class and how big of a site you have, those savings could be pretty significant and are above these savings in both of these analyses. Whether you're owning the system or doing a PPA, there could be further savings there. All right, with that, I don't want to hog the time, and I want to be able to get us to Q&A. So with that, I will hand it back over to you, Dan, and let's see if we have any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Paul and Vito, for that extensive and really, I think, valuable and specific to overview of some of the landscape of just the technical analysis, as well as a lot on how to understand the financial aspects of it. We have one question that I want to make sure we're discussing accurately, because we're talking about vendors, and that was really what a lot of this was, is to kind of get people enough background information to have an intelligent conversation as they continue to evaluate how the points are coming out in the new qualified allocation plan, and start really scoping their projects for next year, and how to start baking this in. I wanted to make sure that we address the difference between a qualified vendor from Paul's Green Power Connection team versus an approved vendor, which I think might speak more to the Solar for All program or adjustable block. So can you guys speak to what authorized versus qualified means in each of your worlds?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I just saw the messaging now, so I'm a little behind, but I think you did reply to it very well. So yeah, when I was referring to finding a qualified installer vendor, that is not referring to that term approved vendor. It is a different term. So I'm just meaning like a reliable installer. When I was speaking towards that, getting that certification from the ICC2 is different than being an approved vendor. So like Dan mentioned, an approved vendor is more so for programs like the adjustable block program. You need to be an approved vendor there to apply for the REC payments there. So you may have an installer who is certified with the ICC. They may be considered, on our end as, a qualified contractor, but they may not be considered an approved vendor. But that's okay. You can still find a different approved vendor to work with, even if your solar installer is not an approved vendor themselves.
And I would point out that any approved vendor, whether it's adjustable block program or the Illinois Solar for All program, has to meet all of the ICC requirements. So they are fully vetted by the state. So if you have an approved vendor in either of those programs, they're vetted by the state. They have to maintain certain quality standards over time. So that's helpful. If you're searching for a vendor, I think both the adjustable block program and Solar for All actually have databases of approved vendors that you can filter by installation type or geography, things like that. So that's another resource to help find vendors generally. Does that help, Jenny, with your question?
I think we got that one covered. I don't know the mechanics of like turning everyone off mute if they want to chime in or ask any questions or offer any comments in the discussion. I'm kind of interested to understand from the group, like, especially on the affordable, on the developer side, have you done this before? Are you looking at it now? And kind of what some of the biggest barriers are, and how we can, if this helped address any of those, and how we can kind of follow up. So that was many questions all at once, but interested to maybe to get the ball rolling. And Vito or Paul, can you maybe speak to either real or perceived barriers that people, especially on the affordable housing side, have, or that they've expressed to you, or?
Well, for LIHTC particularly, yeah, I think that LIHTC, managing that process, the application process and funding process, is complex. And again, I'm not an expert. So I think very often where we run into problems is when people come to us in the middle of that process and want to talk about adding solar. So you have to kind of backtrack and relook at your project plan and your LIHTC basis, and it can become overwhelming fairly quickly. And that's why in my presentation, I was encourage you to think about that up front. But it's being done all the time all over the country. So you can get over that fear aspect and avoid adding it at the end. But I've seen that happen as well. And that's not out of the question, you know, adding solar in the middle of a project.
Great. I had two questions or maybe issues from the audience. I'm a little bit of a novice with the wonders of the GoToWebinar platform. I think Therese Thompson, which had raised her hand earlier. I don't know if you still are dialed in, or you want to, like, if we can unmute you, or you want to ask a question. Oops. All right, you're unmuted, so please.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, no, I was. This has been great, and I'm trying to kind of listen with an architect's ear and a developer's ear, because the client that we got dialed into this webinar through wasn't able to attend. And you know, there's a lot that you talked about in terms of the funding mechanisms and incentives that are a little outside my. Yeah, the particulars are outside my realm. So I'm wondering if you've ever, or if you can envision some sort of kickoff meeting that includes an IDA, you know, the project's IDA representative, as well as ComEd, so that everybody who's got their, you know, the main players in the financing part of it have a chance to talk through it at the same time to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Is that a service that, you know, a developer can request early in the project, obviously?
Well, I'm happy to volunteer other people for work. But maybe, Vito, is that something probably maybe through the For All program that?
Certainly, yeah. If you're working through one of the programs like that, I think that either someone from Adjustable Block or Solar for All would be happy to take part in a conversation like that to help through. I don't know, you know, I can't speak for IDA on that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, obviously, you know, that's something we need to weigh in on as well. But if ComEd, if you think the people on the solar side are amenable to that, that seems like for a developer that is, you know, doing a first-time project, including solar would be the best first step.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, the conversations we've had with folks at IDA on projects in the past, they seem to be very supportive. You know, so you can certainly talk to your project contact there to pull them into a call, or you know, if you're looking to get funding or you're applying for funding, there are folks that you could probably pull in. But they are supportive. I don't think that there's barriers that are created by adding solar with any of the players.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like they need to kind of get just some help with socialization and kind of believing the case or showing the model, you know, that it can work financially. Yeah. Just Paul, I don't know if you have anything to add in, if you guys ever sit in on kind of kickoff calls, or it seems like it'd be kind of specific to the system rather than the building, but.
Right, yeah, so we are involved in kickoff calls and we're happy to support where needed, but the one like caveat I would mention is that we can't really discuss financials. We don't really have the details with the developer and things like that. But in terms of just like breakdowns of available incentives, programs, and just how the whole process goes, we're happy to provide support with that anywhere you need.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what we would be looking for from your side, not specifics on. Just understanding how all the, maybe better understanding how all of the pieces fit together. Can I ask one other question? Are you going to share the graphics from the webinar?
Yeah, actually, I think you should be able to access them directly in the little handouts pane. There's the PDF of the presentation we just walked through. but I can email it to you directly too.
Okay, maybe I just need to change my view or something to see the handouts pane. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll get in touch, Dan, if I can't figure it out.
And speaking of graphics, I want to get to Lincoln's question that he asked, talking a little bit more about how tenant benefits accrue or are divided as a function of the metering structure of the building. And Bonnie, maybe it's worthwhile for us to click back 2 or 3 slides to the stacked bars where Vito walked through the different, yeah, this one, the value stack. And maybe that's a useful graphic to have as we kind of talk through how a tenant benefits in a multi-meter building versus master meter.
Sure. So that's specific to Illinois Solar for All, I believe. And I mean, functionally, you can do this with any solar installation, but because Solar for All requires that 50% of the net metering value goes to tenants, they'll give you a much higher RUC and pay it all up front, but they want to make sure that half of the net metering goes to tenants. Well, if you're in a multi-meter building, that's tricky. You don't want to have to, you know, send conduit to every meter. You know, that's not a wise way to do it. It's costly and such. What we have seen through Solar for All are a number of things. We've seen people propose that, you know, if the value is $100 a year per tenant, they will either not increase rents for X years or whatever, something like that, or, you know, not increase rents by $100 for a certain period. We've seen people proposing free internet to tenants to get to that value of $100 a year, something like that. In Dearborn Homes in Chicago, public housing, they have $69,000 a year in benefits, and they started a job training program funded by that $69,000. And in other case, there's affordable housing in DeKalb, which has a 2 megawatt project. They used the effectively the community solar tariff, or the POG CS they call it, right? So what they've done was they credited people's bills, even though it was behind the meter installation. Effectively, they qualified the program as a behind the meter installation, but it was connected to the grid like a community solar, and all of the apartments got bill credits. They were only at the value of the energy, which was like 6 cents or something like that, but they were able to give all those credits for free, and still had a really nice financial. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it, and the Solar for All team would be happy to help figure it out case by case.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's really what we want to start to get the conversation going on some of these issues. I know a lot of you are thinking very diligently and trying to find every point of leverage to make your project pencil, and ultimately to, you know, support the well-being and stability of your residents. So we are just about at time, so I think we're gonna wrap up here. The slides are available through the download. We can reach out to me directly for any additional questions or things like that, or my fantastic panelists who are so gracious to share their expertise today. And we really want to continue this conversation in a practical and kind of informative way that really helps you do your jobs better. So we're probably get a little survey going and get some feedback from you. Would love your candid assessment about the topics we covered and maybe what you'd like to explore a little bit further. But yeah, without too much further ado, I'm just going to say thanks to everyone for attending, for all the work you do to make clean energy and affordable housing real in the state of Illinois. And just supreme hats off to Vito and Paul and my colleague Bonnie, who is behind the scenes making this all happen. I had originally hoped this might be like an in-person thing where we could like kick the tires and look at some solar panels. So hopefully things will continue, and yeah, we'll follow up. But before I kind of end it, any closing thoughts from Vito or Paul?
Sure. You know, I would say that generally, if you haven't done this before, you scratch your head a little bit, like, how do I add this? Is this going to mess up my application? People are doing it all the time. Don't be afraid to add solar to your LIHTC deals. Take the time, work with someone if it's a new construction, to do some financials and have it all ready with your application. And if you have a well buttoned up financial assessment, it's pretty simple to move forward.
Yeah, Dan, I'll just add, thanks for having me on again. Really enjoyed doing this. And if there are any additional questions, you know, the Green Power Connection team at ComEd is here to help with those type of questions. So you can call our care center and be routed directly to us. So please reach out if you do have any other follow-up questions.
All right, well, with that, just thanks everyone. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunny weather. And we will be in touch. Have a wonderful, balance of the day, balance of the week, and on to April. Thanks, everybody. Take care.